Hi, this is Ken and Michelle Bass.
And you're listening to the Resilient Parenting Podcast.
Hello again. One thing we... What?
I'm sorry. When we start these episodes, we don't have anything planned. And so I'm always like, hey, do you know what we're going to talk about? And he just made the funniest face, like he is up to something.
I'm not up to anything. No more than usual. No. I was just thinking about when we were like checking the mic. Mm-hmm. What was my mic check sound? I went derp, 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 derp.
Oh, yeah.
So the little behind the scenes stuff, you know. If you accidentally hear derp, 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 derp.
Okay, but
it's Ken.
The reason why that happened was because he heard me through the headphones, but he couldn't hear himself. And then he realized he didn't have his mic in front of him. He goes, what's wrong with my mic? Oh, wait.
Yeah. This is why I was on air and not behind the scenes as an engineer. Speaking of learning experiences, we have another one coming up today.
We do. And we're really excited that you took the time to join us. So coming up next. We are joined by Beth Markley, Executive Director of NAMI Idaho, which stands for the National Alliance on Mental Illness. We are so happy to have you join us today. How are you?
I'm happy to be here. I'm well, thanks.
Thank you. We talk about lots of different things on our podcast, and everything really talks about supporting parents. And this is an area that I think it hits a lot of parents that are in this role. And so can you tell us a little bit about yourself and the organization that you work for?
Sure. Well, first, NAMI Idaho. NAMI is the part of a nationwide grassroots organization, although we are independent and local to Idaho. And we provide support, education, and advocacy on behalf and for people with mental illness. And when I talk about mental illness, it's a range of different conditions, including the most severe bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, and things like that, to depression, anxiety, PTS, all kinds of different types of things that you would find in the diagnostic material.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, and that includes, I should mention, 1 in 5 people nationwide has some form of mental illness. In Idaho, it's closer to 28%. So, all along that range.
Well, just at this table right now, I know of 2.
What are you looking at me for?
Well, you're one of them.
Oh, that's right.
I'm just kidding. So 1 in 5. Okay.
1 in 5. And I think it's important to note that a lot of times these conditions, statistically, 50% of the time they're going to show up in a young person by age 14.
Wow.
75% by age 24, if they are going to. There are other conditions that will show up earlier or later. There are anomalies, but we're talking about a fairly significant portion of the population that is living with or who loves someone who is living with a mental health diagnosis or pending mental health diagnosis.
I would wonder, I don't have any statistics or any, I'm just making this up. I think everyone knows someone.
With those numbers, you probably do.
Yeah.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
then some. If you've been on social media lately, you probably can see it all over, but that's another story.
Right.
So let's tell us a little bit. So support, educate, and advocate. So what we're looking at the state of Idaho. So tell us a little bit about what are some things. One thing that comes to mind, and maybe a lot of people think of this, but I think of the walk. The NAMI walk.
Yes.
What are some other things that are within the state of Idaho that,
in terms of the services
what you provide?
Yeah. Right. Okay. Well, I think one of our bread and butter really is our support groups for people with mental illness, and also for the people who are caregivers, loved ones, friends, and family. And these are facilitated, structured opportunities for people to come together and and talk about the situation they're in. Get some feedback from people who have been in their shoes, learn a little bit about local resources. And one thing that was really interesting during the pandemic, things just really exploded in terms of our support groups went online to Zoom.
Right.
And we increased our the number of people we could support by a factor of 10. So we went from about 50 people a month to over 500.
Wow.
And, we were able to support more and more people. And now we have a range of different support groups. So they could be in person, they could be virtual, or they could be hybrid. And you can actually join any NAMI support group anywhere in the country that's virtual for free. So if you find that you can't, you go to our NAMIidaho.org calendar page and you find there's nothing on there that meets your specific needs. You can go to the NAMI.org website and find a resource that is right for you in terms of like what time of day and day of the week and what specific issue that you're looking for. And generally speaking, these are going to be for people who are experiencing mental health issues, and then they're going to be for family members of people who are experiencing mental health issues.
At the same group will be for that, or is there different groups for, let's say,
different groups for
for
what we call peers or people with the mental health issues, and family members or caregivers or loved ones.
Perfect.
And what's really, really important about that kind of support, it's not therapy, but it is. I mean, it's you're talking with people who've lived in your shoes, and if you are a parent of somebody with a mental health issue, if you have lived through watching a young person suffer in your life who is maybe developing some unhealthy coping mechanisms like using substances to self-soothe or acting out in ways that are self-destructive, you get a lot of really bad advice in those situations. You get people who have no idea what you're going through, telling you to, set boundaries, tough love, all sorts of things. And that as a parent can feel very isolating, and pretty soon you stop sharing that kind of information with your friends. Well, that was my experience. I should say that I have two sons, adult sons, and one of whom has a serious mental health condition. And the way it manifested for us was at age 15, he said, I really have anxiety. And at the time, I think of myself as fairly progressive and forward thinking. And I literally said to him, and I'm really embarrassed, I'm like, you really should focus on getting outside more, getting off of your phone, getting better sleep, watching what you eat. And a lot of this stuff will take care of itself. And what I didn't know is my kiddo was saying, I have a debilitating condition that is impacting the way I live my life. And so, I was embarrassingly dismissive about that. Although we did work to find him resources. But at the same time, there's a lot of influence on our kiddos that says, if you use this substance, it will take care of all of your problems. And that's coming from people who they trust. And sometimes those things are more readily available to them when other resources, what we think of as, healthier resources, are not as available or not immediately working, right?
And there's stigma around it as
There's
well.
a huge amount of stigma around it. And although I will say with the younger people, they're able to share more and they're able to, have these conversations with each other, which is great. They also have some misinformation.
When you talked about misinformation, the first thing that came to mind was TikTok, because
or any social media, actually.
But specifically TikTok is very popular, and there is a lot of different mental health support out there, and they're giving misinformation. But because it's on TikTok, or other social, groups, they're thinking it must be true. And so what do you do? We were talking about before we started, like, there's so much to this. So you're a parent, you experienced this, we experienced it as well with some of our kids. And, what is normal development? Is this a crisis? Is this when do you seek help? What is correct when you're looking things up? what information is right. So it can be very overwhelming. And then, a lot of our caregivers may be experiencing their own mental illness. So where do you want to start with that?
Oh my gosh. that is a big question. And I will say, first of all, recognize that it is not just you, right? It's an issue. I will set the stage by sharing a little bit about the situation in Idaho is such that we have the fewest number of psychiatric care providers per capita, from what I understand, in the United States. It can be very difficult to get your child in to see a professional, and then when you feel like a professional is needed, are we talking about LCSWs? Are we talking about MSWs? Are we talking about full psychiatric? That can be very confusing as well. If you're like me and you had some sort of trepidation about medication, that can be difficult to absorb as well. In the case of, in our case, I'm not anti-medication at all. I feel like there's a solution for everybody, and in the case of mental illness, it can take a very long time to find that right combination of therapies and medications and so forth. But in Idaho specifically, the degree to which you can find support or help can be radically different depending on whether you live in a rural or an urban area. In my case, I went to his school counselor who just I have no idea what to do. We did get him into therapy. We did get him on, he was diagnosed at first with some mild depression and generalized anxiety disorder, and we got him on some medication. By this time he was rapidly spiraling, and we were seeing some really dramatic changes in behavior. And I would say, as a parent, you recognize some of those changes, and you recognize when it's a problem and pay attention. I call it the mommy spidey sense, right? Make people listen to you.
Daddy has it too.
And daddy has it too. But I'd say that, there's generally somebody who is more emotionally like in that space, and listen to that parent, right? And know that there are just a wide range of options out there. It's not like breaking your arm and going to the emergency room and you have your arm set, and there might be like therapy, and there might be a cast, or they might do surgery, but you generally have some sense of where things are going to go. You can find yourself with a counselor or therapist that your child doesn't mesh with, who doesn't, and you don't appreciate their approach. You can find yourself being prescribed, or your child being prescribed a medication that has some very serious side effects that are, have negative reinforcement, so they don't want to take it. There are a lot of different options, and it's not set in stone. So the first thing is, if you are a parent, you are that person's best advocate, and take that on. And it may be that this is something that can be addressed in a short time frame with a few little minor adjustments. It may be that this is a long road for a lot of people.
Well, every person is affected differently.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so, what do you do? First of all, listen to your child and don't brush it off. Be educated regardless. So when my husband and I had kids, we took like some pediatric first aid. We wanted to take them camping. We took some, we took some wilderness first aid. We got a AAA membership for, all of those things. Take a mental health first aid class. If you have a child and that child has friends and is in the world, like you want to know what you're looking at when you're seeing a mental health issue.
Right.
A lot of mental health issues also look like regular teenage issues, defiance or risk-taking behavior, or experimental behavior,
Isolation.
A lot of those, that also is, those are indicators of something more serious. So like, how do you tell the difference?
Is there a more common mental illness or any situation like that in Idaho right now for teens?
Is there a more common? I would say, the most common right now are going to be anxiety and depression, and some of that depression is we're coming out of the pandemic and some of the isolation that it caused. But I will say that those situations, those indicators were on the rise before the pandemic.
Right.
So we are experiencing. It did not help.
And again, everybody's different, so it's going to affect them differently. And
it is going to affect them differently.
Experiment with what might work best.
Yeah.
And not, I don't want to go away from what you're talking about, but I've been looking over your shoulder in this room the whole time on this principles of support for NAMI.
So what you're seeing in this room, we're in our conference room here where we host a lot of our support groups. And when we remind ourselves of these principles of support, and since it's over my shoulder, I can't, and I haven't memorized them, but, we recognize that mental illnesses are medical conditions. We recognize that humor is healthy, and when we're in a group with people who have walked in our shoes, sometimes we might find some dark humor in the situation.
So dad jokes are okay.
I knew you were going to go there. You just validated him. Yes, dad jokes are okay.
We also, there's one up there that's we reject guilt. We embrace, our situations, and we reject guilt. We are learning. We are all of us works in progress. And I'll tell you, my husband and I, have been through. We tell each other all the time, people can judge us all they want. We have already judged ourselves most harshly in this situation.
Yeah.
The reality is our son has a medical condition, and he's receiving appropriate treatment. I will tell you that on average, the length of time between experiencing mental health symptoms and a person seeking treatment is 11 years.
Wow.
So seeking treatment. Wow. So you think about a kiddo who's 14, 15 years old thinking, I have a problem. Maybe they don't feel comfortable talking to mom or dad or a school counselor or somebody about what they need. Maybe they just muddle through life, and 11 years, they're now 25, 26 years old before they even start to address what's going on with them. And there's some prefrontal stuff happening, formations, addiction starts to happen in this, and most often in this time. There's all kinds of influences before they start to get appropriate treatment. And if they have a serious condition, they might also have pushed some of their friends and family members and people who love them, their entire support system, away to leave them alone, right? Let me just deal with this on my own. And what we're seeing as the people who love them is, wow, they are really difficult to be with, and I can't wait till they leave. I can't wait till it's legal for me to just shove them out the door with a suitcase. And what's happening is they're suffering, and they're not getting support. So as a parent, it is difficult to raise teenagers. It's difficult to raise young adults. It takes a different, when you're constantly chasing after one to make sure they don't choke on a Lego, that's a much different kind of parenting, right? But when you are searching their room for contraband, or wondering if you should read their diary, if it would be a little bit more enlightening, there's a lot of there's not a what to expect when you're expecting kind of book for that sort of thing. There's a lot of material out there.
There's a lot of material.
But there's also a lot of contradiction out there, and there's a lot of bad advice.
So through my work, I have seen a lot of younger kids coming in as well with anxiety and depression. And some of it stems from the pandemic and the social isolation and then just things that they're having access to now on social media. So, talking about harming self, or some of that as well. And so, it can be really scary for parents because they're thinking, I was thinking of still playing with dolls or playing outside on my bike, and what is happening to why is this happening? And so. I think, I don't think we're not expecting it, but that could also be a sign that they could use some interventions early to help them.
Absolutely. And that goes back to that education piece as a parent. So take a QPR class, question, persuade, refer. It's a suicide intervention course. And we're afraid to say the words as parents.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I do remember driving my kid up to Bogus Basin and like saying, is your tummy okay? Are you feeling sick? And my husband, like, don't put the idea in his head. If you say, are you having thoughts of suicide? You will not put that idea in their head, right? You have an opportunity to start a conversation about how they're really feeling. But I think as parents, and I remember feeling this way, just bringing up the issue was terrifying to me, right? Asking specific questions that I may not like the answer to was terrifying to me. So educate yourself on how to have those conversations. Because your kiddo is having conversations about these things with
just
other
not
people.
with you. Yeah,
and
exactly.
so know what they're saying. And also pay attention to that spidey sense. Talk to your providers about getting them the support that they need, and be relentless be relentless with your providers, be relentless with your insurance companies. Make sure that your health insurance also includes mental health care. A lot don't, and they should.
Definitely.
And recognize that this is something that this is a long game, right? So be out in front of it. Now, should you restrict social media? I don't have the answers to those questions. I can say that I wish that I had better controls, but when my kids were 12 or 13 and they got their first they were still flip phones. We went into smartphone technology, and I was like, I was not prepared. And so, but now we know, right? So maybe think about, like, until they're a certain age, you have parental controls on their smartphones, including knowing what they say and who they're talking with, and restricting them from certain apps. They're always going to find ways around those, but, and you cannot control every single input into their lives, but you can at least have a conversation with them about the context of what they're seeing out there. And there's some of those standbys are still really important. Sitting down and having dinner together as a family a number of times a week. Pausing and having conversations. Like, you're driving in the car, turn the radio off and just say, what was the most interesting thing that happened to you today? Or, what was the thing that happened to you today that you are going to be thinking about when you go to bed tonight? Or, open-ended questions like that.
Right.
Conversations are much more important than actual control in many cases.
Absolutely.
Connection.
Yeah.
Yeah, and put your phone down. As the caregiver, put your phone down, actually make eye contact, or, we've talked before about how, the parallel of walking together or in the car, where it's not as, overwhelming maybe for some kids to have that eye contact, but really giving them your time right there is a gift. And it's hard sometimes for parents, caregivers, to put their own device down. I was also wondering, about for parents to not wait for the kids to approach them about things, but if they notice, or even if they're, have wondering, hey, I just was listening to a podcast and, I learned about this. How are you doing? How would you say? How are you feeling? Having a conversation so that they know that you are a safe person that they can come to, instead of having, like you said, wait 11 years to talk about what's going on, to be able to have that kind of relationship with them where you connect. And, if you're also having your own mental health issues and concerns, take care of it and speak about it, talk about it, normalize self-care and taking care of yourself. And I think that is one thing that we had talked about it. I don't know if you want to go into that now, but, being a model to your to your kids of not, we think we have to be a perfect parent. What we need to be is imperfect and share that, be genuine and authentic.
Be human.
Be human and be able to let them see that, and it's still okay. I'm still okay. I'm still lovable. You're still lovable. And sometimes, just like if you broke your arm, you would get help. If there are things that are going on mental health wise, you take care of it, because that is also important, and you're important.
And when they talk to you, don't judge.
Right. That is tough. Well, I mean, it's because we get into that mode as parents is like, oh, it's a teachable moment. This is what you should do. And this is what you shouldn't do. And so then what do? They stop. They don't want to hear that. They stop.
Yeah. No
bringing
lecturing.
that. They stop. And that is a really hard, I'm a world-class lecturer. You know?
We listen to respond instead of listen to understand.
Right. I remember in the car one time, I noticed my son, like he was just sitting there. Everything was quiet, and he kind of grimaced about something. And I said, what were you just thinking right now? And he said, oh, I said something earlier today, and I just wish I could take it back. And I'm like, wow, do I empathize with that feeling? And then I thought, I don't know that I've ever shared with him. I wish I had done whatever that was a little bit differently. And I really regret speaking with your mother that way, or with your father that way, or your grandparent that way. Or I recognize that I am spiraling in this particular issue, and so I'm just going to go take a walk and just get this out of my head. Here's me putting my phone in the drawer when we have dinner or before bed, right? Like, and that's really hard for me because I think I'm addicted to TikTok, which is a true story.
Great cooking tips.
Yeah, there's a lot of fun stuff
I like
on
the
there.
cat videos personally.
Yeah. Anyway, so there's a lot that you can do to like just have that relationship, and it's really, really hard too because like you're not cool anymore when they become 15, 16, 17. Their friends are cool. They're giving them weird advice. Yes, and so yeah, we were kind of talking about self-care. One of the things that's really key when you are getting bad advice is to be with people who get what you're doing. And I'm a family support group facilitator. Find your people who understand what's happening with you because isolation is killer. Isolation and loneliness are deadlier than smoking, right? So make sure that you are connecting with your social group on a regular basis. Make sure that you are setting healthy boundaries, and that's not just around like work or your family or whatever, but like, around people commanding your time, right? And make sure that you are, for everybody, it's going to look a little bit different. Some people are going to find it helpful to exercise. When my son was really, really, really ill and I just had no control over my life, I got really good at meditating. And it would help me just disengage from that cycle of that spinning in my head. But it's going to be something, different for everybody. But I can say that the self-care tends to go by the wayside when we are in extreme anxiety about somebody else's well-being. Yeah. And we deprive ourselves of sleep. We don't eat well. The worry just gets us, out of control. We feel guilty if we go get a massage or enjoy ourselves for a moment. And the thing is, you've got to live to fight another day. And so engage in those best practices that are good for you. And schedule some time to enjoy yourself with your spouse, with your friends, with somebody you care about, and know that you're doing it so that you can be stronger for that person in your life.
Yeah, that's actually giving care to others. Is you start with giving care to yourself.
Yeah. And you know what? I've talked to people who have been mired in their own mental illness, and this includes, substance use issues, and there is a level of guilt that they feel for what they're putting their family members through. So if you can have the presence of mind to take care of yourself, that alleviates something for them so that they can maybe start to focus. And because those downward spirals, they just all feed off of that negative feedback loop.
Right.
And so if you are doing something good for someone in your life by managing your own self-care.
Okay.
And what that comes down to is there's hope. So don't give up.
That's the last thing on the principles of support.
Oh, really?
We will never give up hope.
We will never give up hope.
And I didn't even know that because I don't have my glasses on.
I was waiting to say that, but you just took it away from me.
Man, go ahead, Ken.
We will never give up hope.
So at the end of our support groups, we do go around and say, just pick one of those that resonates with you. That and being able to share where you are with other people who've walked in your shoes is powerful.
Yeah.
It's so powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So hope, and you're not in this alone.
Right. And we say that there's actually a book that's published by, I don't think I have a copy of it here, but there's a book published by NAMI that's You Are Not Alone. And that's really kind of our mantra.
So even if you're not dealing with it personally, you may know someone who is. So there's ways that
you do.
So even if you're not, you can look at all the resources that you've shared and be able to see. I know there's another way that you can give back to NAMI and all the great work that they're doing, and support those around you. For
Absolutely.
sure.
Yes.
Okay, because we're not in this alone.
We're not in it alone. Just know that. Find your support group. Find your tribe. Get information.
And appreciate dad jokes. Did we
And
cover
dad
that too?
jokes are there's
All right,
never
I don't
enough
see
dad
that
jokes.
on there, but Ken's going to pencil it in at the end.
understood.
We embrace humor as healthy. Come on.
Oh, it said humor, Ken.
Humor. Oh, okay.
I'm just kidding.
My
I'm
fault.
Just kidding. I'm just kidding. Sizzle. Okay. And on that note, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
This podcast is brought to you by the Idaho Children's Trust Fund.